Welcome to another episode of the Four Worlds podcast. Joining us today is Rachel Lee, a founding partner and general manager with Hydefy. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Stephen.
So Hydefy is a responsible materials company that uses fungi-based materials to create an alternative to leather. Rachel, tell us more about that material and how nature is truly at its core.
Absolutely. The material that we have, it is primarily fungi and sugarcane inputs driven. So when we thought about why we got started on this, you hear about leather quite a bit, right? We probably have a lot of items in our households, for example, and we wanted to think about how to create like a third category for consumers. So in our lives, there's animal leather, absolutely beautiful material, but depending on where you're getting it from, there's some ethical, environmental, health concerns in its manufacturing process, not even talking about the greenhouse gas emissions. And, there's a lot of vegan leather out there. And I think most consumers are gradually becoming more aware of it. But a lot of the vegan leather is made out of PVC, polyvinyl chloride, or PU, polyurethane, which comes with its own health and environmental concerns, particularly PVC. So at Hydefy, we were really passionate about the idea of how can we give consumers something else? So that's what got us started in thinking about making fungi and other plant-based materials, starting with leather.
And I just want to know, how do you even get to that point? I'm sure it's a lot of research, a lot of testing, but how do you get to that point where you think of the idea, let's try fungi as an alternative?
Yes. And there's also some other amazing innovators out there that's working on fungi. There's some mushroom-based leather that you may have heard of. For us, we were a pretty unique situation, and fungi was a natural starting point for us because we actually have a parent company called Nature's Find and the Finder Group. And the whole company uses this new extremophile from Yellowstone National Park. So the fungi that we use is actually what we call an extremophile. So it survives in very extreme heat and acidity. And it was in some of the geothermal hot springs of Yellowstone National Park. And one of the original founders, Nature's Find, he was doing PhD research supported by NASA and discovered this extremophile that was super resource efficient. So when you think about growing anything, whether it's a cow or a protein source, anything, we live in a world with increasingly fewer resources. How do you deal in that world? How do you grow something with fewer resources? So when this extremophile was quick to grow, it grows within 2 to 3 days. It means lower carbon, water, energy footprint, etc. And it had interesting properties such as it has all the essential amino acids. So the food side of the business was already starting to look into creating food products with it. But if you look underneath a microscope, it has this filamentous structure that kind of resembles like fibrous network like skin. And that's what sparked the idea of the biomaterial side of the business, which eventually grew into what's Hydefy. So we thought, what if we treat this like a skin instead of an animal like cow hide? Can we make a material out of it? And then over time, we went through a lot of R&D iterations and the material evolved into something different than where we started. But that was the genesis of thinking about this extremophile and bringing this new to world organism to the market.
And you talk about going through the R&D process, finding out, coming up with the idea. How long approximately did that process take? Because it doesn't sound like an easy process. Of course, nothing is ever easy, but this one does seem a little complex. So how long did that process take from idea to starting to produce something?
Honestly, longer than I thought it would and longer than we probably wanted. And it's a little hard to say definitive numbers because I think in the beginning, it was very bare bone R&D lab where we did a lot of experiments. And then a lot of it was to create proof of concept to even see, is there there, to convince the company to potentially invest more resources. into growing the business and investing in R&D. And I think there's a lot of lessons I learned from that. I would say a lot of the work got accelerated when we had some of our rock star scientists, especially with people with experience in commercialization and with PhD backgrounds join. So once you have the magic of having the right team, we also made a couple of pivots. And once we did that, I would say, probably around 3 years time.
Wow.
Getting it. And you're spot on. There's a lot of lessons in transforming a fungi into a leather-like material.
I mean, really, when you think about it, 3 years, I'm sure where you're at right now, the point you're at with Hydefy, do you look back and say, wow, that 3 years really did go quick when all is said and done?
Yes, because not only I joined the company, Nature's Find, in, March to May of 2020. And it feels like a different point in time, but it was peak pandemic. So there was also a different period of the world of working in a lab looked very different. And the time really does fly because each phase feels different and exciting. And we're in a privileged position where we get to interact with a lot of brands that come with different stories, that come with what slightly different things they're looking for. So it feels like we're working on many products at once. So time really flies when you're having fun, like to say.
Yeah. I mean, it's cliche, but it really is the truth. You're obviously doing something that you like, something that you're passionate about, and it's a part of your personal background or your environmental philosophy. So take me through how you personally have helped influence the impact of Hydefy.
I'd like to think that I had a pretty big impact. So my background actually was in a bit of more in food. So for many years, I was passionate about improving food systems and health and human lives. So that's what naturally led me to meet with Nature's Find, because I was so excited about innovation, because we talked about world with increasingly scarce resources, and it's how we use those resources and do it in a way to benefit people. I think that's where innovation comes in. So Nature's Find was working on this really promising project of bringing a new to world protein, and there was a wave of food tech, right? There are a lot of energy. There's a lot of amazing innovators working in this space. And it felt like there's an opportunity to bring that similar energy to the material space, because fashion not only employs a lot of the global workforce, it uses a lot of the Earth's resources, has a deep impact on environment. I think we see a lot of the statistics around it being responsible for 10% of greenhouse gas emissions go around, for example. So when the opportunity came to essentially build this startup within a startup, to kind of start Hydefy and build it to a biomaterials business from Nature's Find, it felt like a dream role to help that. And from there, of course, got other teammates to join, built the team, and then we built a product.
And when you talk about the climate impact that, let's say, the fashion industry, the leather industry has on the environment, is that one of the reasons why you chose fashion and in particular leather to start with Hydefy?
Yes. And I think there was a lot of, being in the right space at the right time. So fashion, a lot of leading fashion groups, especially the European ones, because they either set public targets around 2030 goals around emissions and environmental footprint, or because of upcoming regulations, they are forced to look at their supply chain in a more meaningful manner. And within that space, so there's that demand and the pull from the potential consumer customers. And then leather in particular is interesting because it's directly impacted by not only some consumer demands to be animal and cruelty free, but also increasing demands to use less toxic chemicals and less of petroleum-based inputs, because the alternative, like vegan leather, is petroleum-derived. And then compared to, polyesters or nylon or other type of textiles that are petroleum driven, I think with consumers, with leather, we are already open and used to the idea of leather being from multiple sources. So you have like calf skin, lamb skin, you have exotics like reptilian leather. So, and lastly, because there's a wide range of leather types, there's also a wider range of willingness to pay. So for all of those reasons, it felt like leather was the right place to start.
Absolutely. When you're when you're producing these fungi-based materials, specifically fungi-based leather, do you try to replicate maybe what a normal, you say, reptilian leather looks like, or cowskin leather looks like? Do you try to replicate that to kind of make it still seem like it's not the real thing, but a traditional leather?
Yes and no. So when you think about having an impact, a lot of it, to have an impact, we need to replace or become a meaningful part of a brand's supply chain and their materials. And a lot of what they have are the traditional looking things, whether it's like a cow leather, like a traditional pebble grain or just a traditional grain. And I think there's that demand from some brands. At the same time, if you and I are carrying around a bag or a shoe made with just black leather look, we don't know what that's from. So if you want consumers to want something, I think there's some interest from brands to make it look different. So at Hydefy, that's one of the choices we made, to give brands a few different options. So if you want something that really looks like it, we'll deliver on that. But at the same time, if we want to create something that not only is made from something different, but looks different, let's also work on that.
Yeah. So what are those things that you're trying to test or develop that does make Hydefy stand out from a looks aspect? Because obviously now we know it stands out because it's fungi-based leather. But as a visual standpoint, what is your team doing to kind of stand out and make sure someone looks at a leather bag or a fungi-based leather bag and say, oh, that's made from Hydefy?
Yes. So and some of this will need to be a partnership with the brands and fit their brands' identities. But one of the things, if you come swing by our booth at a trade show, for example, that you'll see is we have a lot of traditional looking materials with different colors. And we also have a catalog of things that play with optical effects. So things that may look like oil and water on a surface, or things that feel more like leather, but look like crushed velvet, for example. So these are things where we're not reinventing the whole technology. There's some existing partners out there that can help us achieve some of these optical illusions. But our idea was, let's apply that to a new material, because the synergy of that could be something that's interesting to brands.
Yeah, definitely. So, and you talking about partnerships, tell everyone about the partnership that you have going on right now.
Yeah. So I can talk about our partnership with Stella McCartney, which has been a fantastic one. Our partners have been wonderful. Some I cannot name right now because until the products hit the market, but it's a dialogue, and we get a lot of feedback in terms of the hand feel, gloss, the colors we want to do. And then we also inform brands about how to work with a fungi composite material. Stella McCartney in particular, they are creating elevated. They're known for using future forward and earth friendly materials in very high end fashion collections, and they have high standards. So we needed to have created something that has a good look, feel, and performance. So if you're asking about the latest launch that we had, that one was a pretty fun one to work with, though stressful at that time, because we actually we met them last summer, and there was a unique opportunity where they were launching a new style of a bag. So that's the new Rider collection. So we had this opportunity, if we could meet the timing, to be a new type of material in a new type of bag. And they also happened to fall in love with the silver metallic that we had, which was very experimental at that time. So they said, let's get this on the September Paris Fashion Show. And this was June when we talked about this. So we have a team that loves a challenge, and an amazing one. So 3 months later, I saw it go down the runway, and we did the global sales for the summer collection. And I saw the magic that can happen when you have a supplier and a brand working as partners that are motivated together with a goal in mind. So I find all of these partnerships really exciting, because everyone is trying to work on bringing a new innovation and trying to introduce people to new types of sustainable materials. So appreciate all of these partnerships.
So clearly there was some challenges, very stressful moments. Go through some of those hurdles, some of the biggest hurdles and challenges that you had to get over throughout the development process and the creation process.
Yeah, where should I start?
Yeah, right. Is there too many to count?
I think the overall is that, like with many new innovations, whether it's in a textile or something else, for us, there was no playbook because also we were one of the earlier movers and we actually built it in quote unquote stealth. We were in a very grateful position to get this support from a parent company. So we focused on the product. But I think there are a couple of challenges to bringing some of these. And it's that you need to make sure that performance is table stakes. So finding the right formulation to get it to be strong. And then second, finding the right equipment and process and partners to make it happen, since there's not much precedent and there's no players or equipment specializing in this. So I would say those were the high level challenges. And as I was hinting at earlier, we started with a more traditional tannery-like process.
Right.
So I spoke with so many tanneries, took the material to different tanneries to, test whether we could use the traditional equipment and methods. And we quickly realized that that was not probably the most sustainable path. I think it could work, but when we think about our ambitions around scale, was not the right choice for us. So we then pivoted and, continued to pivot. But I would say those were some of the challenges that we started off with.
And that's all a part of the innovation process. And this might be a difficult question for you, but what leads and how do you approach the innovation and innovative process? Is it science? Is it fashion? Is it sustainability? Or is it something else or everything?
It's everything, a bit of all. I would say for us, we are first and foremost science-led, while always keeping the North Star of sustainability at play. And as a team, we've had to discuss what our core values are and how we set parameters. Because as much as I love fashion, fashion will always be subject to fashion and trends. And we cannot, as a small team, change our direction every time there's a little bit of a different direction. So we found that also with sustainability, because when you think about what consumers and customers ask for, there's different flavors of sustainability that can be important, whether it's the greenhouse gas emissions, whether it's water and land usage, even language like, is it bio-based or biodegradable? People define it differently. And we try to be a good partner to many, but we have to pick focus and do what's right for us. Yep. So for us, it's mostly science-led, with making sure our North Star of sustainability is there. But ultimately, we need to also care about fashion, because people will buy and sell what's attractive, and it needs to look good.
Absolutely. And let's talk about timing. Like, how important was timing to you? Because when we talk about sustainability as a trend, it's only going up from here. How has timing played a role in that, figuring out when to start developing this, with sustainability being at on a lot of people's minds?
It worked out. Because I would say that, like, for me personally, when I got interested in it in 2019 and then starting on it in 2020, it didn't feel like as much of a mainstream dialogue, while as it feels like AI or sustainability or tech. It's all of these languages where ultimately I think we'll be in a scenario of the world in which we don't have a tech company or an AI company or a sustainability company. It's every company is going to have to incorporate those elements into their business to go into the next phase of business and to survive. So for us, it's worked out. But I would say even within the past 5 years, we've seen ebbs and flows where people's willingness to pay looks different for sustainability, for example. And quite frankly, some of the uncertainty or volatility around trade also affects. So when you're, for brands, when business line, your bottom line is impacted by a lot of macroeconomic factors, then how much is their willingness to pay around sustainability? I think those are things that we see vary, but overall, the macro trend is every company needs to care and will be caring about it.
Absolutely. So you have a sustainable product, but let's look at the production process. Where does sustainability stand in the actual production process itself?
Yeah, so I would say where sustainability comes in is in multiple steps of the process. So everything from the selection of what we put in it to how we process it to how we think about the afterlife of it. So what we do in terms of our process is that we take the fungi that we grow through fermentation, and we also take other plant-based polymers that are grown through fermentation as well, made through fermentation.
Right.
In the case of Stella McCartney material, we used sugarcane waste streams, polymers derived from sugarcane waste streams. So the benefit of fermentation and the fungi, in addition to it just grown in a shorter period of time, and it uses more resources from nature. And we combine all of those inputs, and then we heat them and mold them into sheets of different thickness. So I was mentioning earlier that we moved away from more of a traditional tanning-like process, and there were many reasons behind that choice, including the fact that it opens up it really opened up the world in terms of who we can work with. And for us, we use actually very common polymer equipment. So things that you might see in the plastics industry to make floorboards, lamination, etc. We're able to use those equipment and imagine the scale that we can make it with. But the other benefit of this is that it eliminates many steps and a lot of water. So the process doesn't use water. It's a pretty quick process, which leads to lower amount of resource and energy usage. And then once we have the sheets and rolls of material, then we finalize with a top layer of finishing that can adjust color, hand feel, and gloss to customers' liking.
And it's a novel process. It's a novel product as well. Hearing all about that production process, how do you stay ahead in a space and an industry that's one, incredibly competitive, and two, rapidly evolving?
Yeah, that is always the quintessential challenge for us. Until now, it's been getting to it's where I think we go back to the principles that we mentioned, because ultimately I think there was a period of time in which the novelty and the sustainability alone was enough to merit enough curiosity for someone to try something. But looking ahead, that's not going to last. You need something that is strong and durable enough that it could be a mainstream part of a supply chain. For example, it needs to independently look good and feel good so that if I put it in front of someone and don't tell them what it is, they need to find it attractive independently, for example.
Right.
So I think that's how we think about staying ahead. The making a material that is super durable, what I like to call life proof, that can survive and just grow with you and still look good and feel good. I think the piece where that's probably the next phase for us is that we're still pretty small. So we're focusing on core colors and having a selection available, and then also customizing for some brands, but we're not at a place yet to behave like the traditional industry, where for them, every quarter, every half a year, they're, updating their color palettes, for example. And I think I'd like to think that's next phase for us, but for now, focusing on what we're doing and providing options that stand through tests of time.
Absolutely. I was just going to ask, what is next for Hydefy? If you wanted to add anything else, whether it's new materials, getting into new industries, anything like that, because we did already talk about some partnerships and some new products coming out that we just can't touch just yet. So teasing the audience a little bit. But what else is next for Hydefy? Where do you see this company going?
Yeah, when we think about what's next in terms of products, for example, hopefully you'll be seeing more of different formats, different products come to life with different brands. beyond that, for us, we're thinking about what else can we bring to consumers. So even within the textile space, there are things like ultra soft, ultra supple material that goes even beyond what we have right now.
Mm-hmm.
There's also some interesting potential for non-textile areas that our technology is able to get into. But with the quintessential challenge of a startup, we want to maintain focus. So get this initial phase right. And for us, that's 2.0 and 3.0.
Absolutely. Now, is there anything else that you wanted to add? Maybe we left out, maybe that we didn't get to?
Yeah, maybe to more fully address your question about, what's next. There's like the products, but I think, when we think about the upcoming years and in the next 5 years, I hope we are beginning to move from a curiosity to an accepted textile. And while many designers are aware of the material, consumers have had limited opportunity to interact with Hydefy and also just this broader next-gen materials at large. By then, consumers are going to have proof points around how durable and how nice feeling the materials are. So we want consumer acceptance and adoption. And my hope is that by this material becoming a more commonly accepted textile, this can open doors for other sustainable textiles. And I think a big success will be, an indicator for big success will be if we see traditional players, whether they're tanneries or large textile manufacturers, also start to provide options, because ultimately that's what we want, consumers to have options to move and go towards that way.
And if there's one thing that the audience or the listeners can take away after this interview, what would that be? What would you want them to know the most about leather alternatives, specifically this fungi-based one that you guys have worked so hard on?
Yeah, I would like consumers to know that the future is here. It's not far away. We have sustainable materials that people don't need to compromise on, whether it's about their choices and they can feel good about making the choice. There's Hydefy, and what I find exciting is there's also other innovators working, and hopefully there will be more and more options for consumers. And I would say the other thing is, as consumers, I think you asked a question before around if we could change one thing about how the world thinks about materials.
Right.
And I thought about that, and I realized I don't think we think about materials. I don't think we think about materials enough. So that's the other thing. I hope that we could think about materials more, whether it's, the clothes we're wearing, the chairs we're sitting on, what are they made out of? What happens to them afterwards in the afterlife? And what are choices that we can be making in our day-to-day lives?
Is there anything else that you wanted to add?
Thinking about what are the things that actually build to something. Being busy working on things doesn't always build to the right thing. So when we think about the choices and investments that we need to make early, that will unlock and accelerate everything else. So for us, that was investing in the right people and the product and the partners versus nice to have that can wait. For us, the nice to have was the building the buzz, the marketing, etc. I think that was a key lesson for us. It's like, what are the critical must-haves versus the nice-to-haves that determine whether you have a business or not.
So it's like anything, it took a village to get to where you are.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Any social medias, any websites that you wanted to get out there so people know exactly where to find you?
Yes. Find us at hydefy.com.
Perfect. Easy enough. Well, Rachel, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to continue to follow as Hydefy continues to grow, and we're looking forward to the future.
Thank you, Stephen.
All right, everyone. That's all the time we have. We'll see you next time.